The following is Class 16 on the Yoga Sutras, given by Hridayananda Das Goswami in fall of 2004 in San Luis Obispo. Mantra 9 of Sri Ishopanishad will be discussed for the first 20 minutes. Then Sutras 346 to 351 will be covered.
Andham tamak pravishanti Andham tamak pravishanti Ye vidyam upasate Ye vidyam upasate Tato bhuya ivate tamo Tato bhuya ivate tamo Yo vidyayamrita Yo vidyayamrita Andham tamak pravishanti Ye vidyam upasate Tato bhuya ivate tamo Yo vidyayamrita. So Alan, you got to chant it. Lead us in chanting.
The whole thing, you want me to do the whole thing all the way through?
Let's do like I do. We can do each quarter responsibly.
Andham tama pravishanti
Andham tama pravishanti
Ye vidyam upasate
Ye vidyam upasate
Tato bhuya ivate tamo
Tato bhuya ivate tamo
Yam vidyayam mritaha
Yo vidyayamritaha. Andham tama pravishanti Ye vidyam upasate Tato bhuya ivate tamo Yo vidyayamritaha. Andham tama pravishanti Ye vidyam upasate Tato bhuya ivate tamo Yo vidyayamritaha. Andham tama pravishanti Ye vidyam upasate Tato bhuya ivate tamo Yo vidyayamritaha. So the translation, this is literal, into blind darkness they enter, people who worship ignorance, and into still blinder darkness, people who delight in learning. Clearly paradoxical. So the first two words, andha means blind. So andham tama, blind darkness. Pravishanti, they enter. Ye, those who. Avidyam, the little apostrophe before vidyam, stands for a short a, which was dropped for euphonic purposes to make it sound better, according to Sanskrit rules. Ye vidyam. So it's really avidya, which means ignorance, unknowledge. Upasate, those who worship. The word upasate, I'll explain to you what that actually means. Because it's a very common word in Sanskrit literature, to worship or to attend on. Upa means near, by the way, which is related to the Greek hypo, like near but not quite, less than. Anyway, upa, and then as. The verb as means to sit, like the word asan. You guys know that stuff. The asan. Yeah, seat or sitting postures. And ate is just the third person plural, they. Upasate. And so literally it means, and the word as, which means to sit, from which you get the word asana, also means, this verb also means to remain, like to keep on doing something. As. It's also used that, like to sit in something, in the sense of to hang in there, continue to do something. And so to sit near, or to remain near, those two senses, in the sense of attend upon, to serve, to attend upon, like a servant that stays near the master and so on. And so this is the common word which is used for worship, upasana. Even they talk about the upasana kanda, the upasana section of the Vedas and so on. So here, those who are sitting near or attending upon, serving, worshipping, ignorance. And of course also in the Upanishads, in the jargon of the Upanishads, avidya, or ignorance, often simply means the material world or material life. It's commonly used in that way. Even in the commentaries on the Upanishads, Vedanta, Shankara, and the later commentators, a lot of times when they say avidya, they just mean material life, the material world, and so on. The material world of illusion, the ignorance. It's interesting, you find a similar thing in Islam, where I believe that Muhammad referred to pre-Islamic Arabia as Jahiliyyah, I think the word is in Arabic, it just means the darkness. And we talk about the dark ages. So here, the ignorance means, avidya simply means the material world, material life, material consciousness. And so, it's interesting, this verse is obviously quite ironic, this ancient mantra, because it begins with what you'd expect to hear in an Upanishad, that those who worship ignorance or materialism enter into blind darkness. Okay, that sounds normal. The next line is quite startling, though. The next line is, and that's the punchline, tato bhuya, which means literally even beyond that. Tato, from that, bhuya, further from that. In other words, even beyond that, eva, indeed. Te, they, tamo, enter darkness. Ja, which the word ya there is actually ye, they, but it just becomes ya again for this, what's called Sandhi. Ya'u, those who rataha are delighting vidyayam, in knowledge or learning. So what is this about? It's very interesting. Yes, Tony?
It must be talking about material knowledge. Those who delight in learning.
Well, avidya, although the word means ignorance, can also refer to material knowledge in a sense, like biology or chemistry or just studying about, materialism. I mean, there's something, and so you go even further down.
Well, I always say this sometimes, when people study, just delight in words and just knowledge, even about spiritual knowledge, but just delighting in text and grammar, but without having the experience, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of see it. Some way I see the verse as being, there's some people like in the world who are just materialistic and they don't really think about spiritual matters or even more sophisticated material things like biology, science, or something they just live their lives. And that would be avidya. But then but sometimes even worse is people who don't experience life, but they just get into knowledge too much and they don't experience any real experience in life sometimes. But also no real spiritual experience either.
There's actually a verse in the Gita which says that. There's a verse in the Gita, I can't remember exactly, I think it's chapter 14. It's talking about the three gunas, and it says that tasmat sattva nirmalatvat, precisely because sattva, goodness, is relatively nirmala, or free of gross contamination. Prakashakam, it's enlightening. Anamayam, which literally means sort of like free of disease, like it's relatively pure. But then Krishna says, Sukha Samgena Badnati, but even sattva binds. Badnati, the verb to bind, like bondage, like material life is bondage. It binds by attachment to the happiness that comes from goodness. Because when you're sort of a very good person, you're sort of always, bouncy and everything. And here's what I'm referring to what Alan just said. Krishna says, Jnana Sangena, which in this case means by attachment to knowledge. By attachment to knowledge, but nati, it binds. That sattvam, here the idea is that the sattva gun, this is sangena, the instrumental by attachment, by sangha. Can you see it? By attachment to jnana, to knowledge, sattva binds. It will bind you in terms of keeping you in the material world, keeping you trapped in the karma, so you can't be liberated, which is the goal of the Upanishad. So that's sort of confirmed. So that's a reference to what you were saying. And there's another sense, which I'm going to go off here, and give another sense of what I think it means and how some Vaishnava commentators have interpreted it. And that is that if you read the Isha Upanishad, what you find is that ultimately it gives a very personal conception of God. For example, I should have brought a copy of the Isha Upanishad, but for example, I think text 16 says, Hiranmayena patrena satyasyati mukam, that the face, mukha, the face of the truth, capital T, is apihitam, is covered by the Hiranmaya patra, this golden covering, like this effulgence. And therefore, tattvam pushan, therefore, O Lord, maintain or remove that covering. Tattvam pushan, satya dharmaya drishti, so that you can be seen in truth to the person who has faithfully done their duty. So, and there's other statements like that. Tadejati Naijati, the Isha Upanishad, that the truth moves and doesn't move. It walks and doesn't walk. And so ultimately, it is a personal conception of the Absolute. There are several personal prayers in the Isha Upanishad. Twang, you. And that the truth has a face. And so, if you study the history of world religions, and I mean, you name it, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, world religions, you find an interesting fact, and that is that in every one of the major world religions, you'll find that there was a highly intellectual development which came to deny that there's anything like a personal God. And this particular, in Islam, for example, you look at the Mu'tazila, who were very intellectual theologians who actually were the official court theologians in Baghdad during Ali Baba, those glorious days of Baghdad as the city of great culture. So the Mu'tazila, about 1,000 years ago, were actually the official court theologians, and they were infatuated, or maybe that's a little pejorative, they were fascinated by Greek philosophy. And they were very rationalistic. They were sort of, and through all this very heavy, enthusiastic rationalism, they came to claim that all the statements in the Quran that talk about a personal God are false, or they're simply symbolic statements that, because educated, rational, philosophically trained people would never think that way. You find that Maimonides, a medieval Jewish philosopher, you find Meister Eckhart in Europe and Christianity, and in Hinduism, of course, you have the great Shankara, a very powerful intellectual, saying the same thing, that ultimately there's no personal God. And so there's a sense in which ordinary people who are just ordinary working people, they're not great spiritualists, they're not practicing yogis, they're just kind of people. They often tend to have a somewhat personal notion of God. They tend to pray and so on and so forth. And then you have this phenomenon which you can observe in all the world religions, where people that get very, very intellectual tend to reject that, and even to think that I am God. And so what I just did is that particular interpretation is not. I can't assemble textual evidence to prove that at this point that long thousands of years ago when this was written, that's exactly what the author was thinking. I'm just saying that is, I think, a plausible application. Because you see what Krishna says here, jnana sandhina vadnati, that the goodness, by attaching you to knowledge, you become attached to your sense of knowledge, it binds you, but it binds you in the mode of goodness. Whereas ordinary material life is considered to be in passion and ignorance, just working for money and trying to get a good reputation and identify with your body. And yet what the Upanishad is saying here, that somehow by delighting in some kind of knowledge, one actually goes further into darkness than even the ordinary materialistic people. And so one way, and I'm giving you a sort of a traditional Vaishnava interpretation of this Upanishad, they have historically interpreted to mean that those who are very intellectual often come to lose their power to understand what even people in general do understand. That ultimately there's a God, a personal God to whom you can pray and to whom one should take shelter, and which is ultimately taught in the Yoga Sutras. Samadhi siddhi Ishvara pranidhanat. The perfection of samadhi is devotion to the Lord. And the Gita, of course, is extremely theistic. Extremely theistic. And so, for that matter, in the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Puranas, the great texts, the Svetasvatara Upanishad, many of the Upanishads, the Katra Upanishad. So the simple understanding that there is a Lord, as of course Patanjali uses the word Ishvara, in these sort of impersonal systems of thought that arose among intellectuals in the world religions, there really is no Ishvara. There really is no Lord.
I want to throw something out there and ask you, since we're going to talk about sutras anyway. Could you kind of relate this to the sutras in the first chapter that, Bhava Pratyaya Videta Pritilayanam. Bhava Pratyaya Videta Pritilayanam. Where some of the commentators talk about how some people reach like a certain spiritual state, it becomes a kind of a plateau, a spiritual stagnation, which you have to break out of. Videta, goes without bodies, or Pritilayanam goes absorbed into nature. So, could you possibly make that leap and say that this is something akin to that? You know what I'm talking about, right? Don't you?
Yeah, the Pratilayanam, that those are sort of dissolved into nature, merged into nature.
Or without bodies.
Yeah, which can mean the gods who don't have gross bodies, organs.
Right.
So, in terms of spiritual stagnation, it seems that one can become stagnant in any kind of path. Any path you choose, you're going to find some people on that path who are stagnant, who are just kind of in a rut. I think in every religion and spiritual path in the history of the world.
So I don't know how you translate those ones.
The first words were, this is a one day. I won't bring the books today.
Okay. Middle of the first chapter.
Yeah, what was it? Bhava?
Bhava. Pratyaya.
Pratyaya?
Pratyaya.
Oh, Pratyaya. Bhava Pratyaya.
Videha Prakriti Layanam.
Bhava Pratyaya Videha Prakriti Layanam.
But anyways, that's a lot of commentators translate those as, and the one before it was Viram or Pratyaya. I forget one before it. But they translate those as like this spiritual stagnation where people reach a certain stage and it becomes sort of a plateau, and then the next verse after those two is Strata Virya Smriti Samadhi Pragya. Like to break out of that, you have to use faith, memory, energy, etc., etc.
Yeah, you could say that.
And then actually, right after that, it goes into the whole thing about Ishvara.
Yes.
Ishvara finding that.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point. What you're saying reminds me of what Krishna says at the beginning of chapter 12 in the Gita, where Arjuna asks Krishna, who understands yoga the best? Those who are personally devoted to you, meditating upon you, or those who choose the impersonal path and worship some type of invisible, formless divine. And Krishna says that those who are personally devoted understand yoga the best. And then he says that those who are doing on the impersonal path they'll eventually make progress. But then Krishna says, Klesho vikatara stesham vyaktasata chetasam. Those whose minds have become attached to that impersonal conception, he says that the path is much more painful, much more troublesome, because it's like a square peg in a round hole. We are people, we're persons, and we're trying to depersonalize ourselves through meditation, and it's artificial.
And Prabhupada kind of tackling that too, right? He specifically says those who are devoted to the Advaitic ideal are exactly that. They're the ones who are falling into the greater darkness.
Yeah, exactly. In the Upanishad.
In his translation of this very Upanishad.
Yeah.
But then it's also like Ramakrishna, right? Where he says he doesn't want to be to bring the God he don't like, but
he doesn't want to what?
Ramakrishna, was devoted to the personal God Kali.
Right.
Goddess. And he would say, and he was always begging her, please don't let me fall into this stale and Advaitic state, stale, I always want to be, a lover of God, not just, not just the dry, dry,
Yeah, that's similar feeling. So, if there's not any other comment or questions about that, we'll go on to the Yoga Sutras.
That's my hand.
No, okay.
I'm talking.
So, we're going to finish today and then the next 2 Saturdays, and I guess that will be it for the Yoga Sutras.
You're going to start on with the next big text?
Yeah, to see what to do. We'll see what to do. I have to consult with my advisor and see what we're going to do next. So, 346. Rupa lavanya balavajra sanhananatwani kaya sampat. Bodily perfection includes beauty, grace, strength, and a diamond's hard glow. So, for those seeking a perfect body, here's a definition. I'm going to go a little quickly on some of these, unless there's something that you want to talk about. We will, but so bodily perfection includes beauty, rupa, grace, lavanya, strength, and a diamond's hard glow, which is how Barbara Miller translated it. And then grahana swarupa asmita anvaya artha vatvat samyamat indriya jaya. I'm following Feuerstein. I'm telling Alan here in the sense that I separated the words, took out some of the sandhis so you could see it more easily what's there. From perfect discipline, which is her translation of samyama. From perfect discipline of the receptive, intrinsic, egoistic, relational, and purposive functions of the sense organs, one attains mastery over them. So grahana, taking, reception. So the senses, one achieves indriya jaya, victory over the senses, which are always... And this whole notion of defeating your senses, of course, is based on the very common yoga idea that our senses are dragging us out into the material world to gratify themselves, sense gratification. The eyes, the ears, we're sort of being consciously pulled out into the gross material world for self-gratification. And so to conquer the senses means to bring them under control. And of course, in Ashtanga Yoga, ultimately pratyahara, to bring them in, so that one can focus on the soul and God rather than being dragged out into hedonism. So the senses perform grahana, they receive things, swarupa, which he translates intrinsic, their own nature, asmita, egoistic, anvaya, relational, arthavat. So if you would like to, if anyone would like to discuss this technical, sort of very intellectual analysis of the senses, we can. But is there anything that strikes you as you'd like to talk about here?
The vatva?
Oh, vat, it means like, or possessing, and twa is nest. In other words, the fact that samyama is the discipline of that quality of the senses of possessing all these things, grahana, sarupa, asmita, anvaya, and so on. So you have perfect discipline of this quality of the senses, namely the senses possess all these different aspects or functions. That's what the grammar is there, essentially. Well, I mean, for example, artha, which he translates purpose. The senses have purposes. For example, the eyes want to see something beautiful, or the ears want to hear something nice, or the tongue wants to taste something. And the senses, relating to other things, asmita, the egoism, pride, or vanity of the senses. And sarupa, their nature, grahana, the fact they're receiving different things. So it's obviously a somewhat intellectual analysis. Yes?
It's almost like, it's interesting because that you're like saying the thought that you don't see is that seeing, it's almost like kind of keeping a balance with it all, not the senses see things, but you're not seeking to see things, or your senses are inputting to you. I mean, it's from this other perspective, it's just egoistic. I was saying all of that. It's still saying those are going to happen, but
Well, that's very much true. That's very true. Consider your car, for example. I mean, you have to have your car under control. Otherwise, it's dangerous to drive it. But once the car is under control, it's a valuable instrument. And so the senses are meant to be... In fact, this example I just gave is very ancient because there's a very ancient Vedic analogy which is used in a lot of ancient literatures comparing the body to a vehicle, a ratha. Sometimes translated chariot, but it really just means a vehicle, car. So the body is like a vehicle. The mind is like, let's say a chariot with horses, a horse-driven or pulled vehicle. So that the mind is like the reins of the vehicle. The intelligence is like the driver, and the soul is the passenger. This is a very ancient analogy, which is used in many literatures. And so you have to have the senses under control. Oh, I'm sorry, the horses are like the senses. The horses are the senses. So it's like if you're in a chariot, if the horses are out of control and running wildly, you're in serious trouble. And that's the idea. If the senses are running wildly, we're in trouble. But if we have control over them, we can use them according to our best spiritual intelligence to see things that are worthy of our gaze, to listen to things that are worthy of hearing, and so on, that actually serve our best interest. Was that anything else about that? So then, tato mano jadi twang vikarana bhava pradhana jayascha. Another type of jaya, another victory here. From this, tato, from that indriya jaya. In other words, tato here means indriya jaya, from this indriya jaya. Mano jadi twang, quickness of mind. One acquires quickness of mind. By the way, the Indonesian island Java is the same word, Java. Anyway. From this one acquires quickness of mind, and then perception without the aid of the senses. Karana, the word karana often means senses. And so vikarana means without the senses. So vikarana bhava, this state of perception without the senses. And mastery over primordial matter. Pradhana is primordial matter. Have you ever studied about the Mahatattva and Pradhana? No. I'll do it real quick. What's that?
A little bit. It's Samkhya, right?
Yeah, and it's found in the Puranas also. I'll just do it real quickly because it's an interesting concept about how the world gets created. This word pradhana, which just means like primary. In fact, the way you say prime minister in Hindi is pradhana mantri, the prime minister. And so pradhana meaning prime. The idea is that there is a state of matter when it is totally inert. Nothing interacts. Fire doesn't burn. There's a type of primeval fire that doesn't burn. Water doesn't wet. There's wind but it doesn't blow. Everything is absolutely inert. And it's just being sort of stored or within the body of God. This absolutely inert state of matter. There's no activity, no interaction. And that's called pradhana. And then there's a famous verse in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, that Sa Aikshita, he, the Lord, glanced. Sa Aikshita, he glanced. And the idea is, I'll draw a little picture for you. Can't get this open. Let's say here's, oh my God, This is going to be silly. Okay, I'll just draw circles. If I try to draw the face of God, that won't work. So, let's say here is the Lord. Put an L. And then capital L, right. And then here is Pradhana, this primeval matter. And then it said, this is a famous verse, very famous verse, which is often quoted in the Vedanta debates. Saikshata, from the verb each, planning it. Each means to glance over. And so from this verb, each, aikshata, he glanced, he gazed. So the Lord glances at Prakriti. And what happens is, it's said just like, the example is actually given frequently in this ancient literature, that as a man who wants to procreate approaches his wife and somehow tries to enthuse her to procreate, and so then they join together and they produce a child. There are various ways to enthuse people. So the idea is that when the Lord glances over this pradhana, that he glances, the power of his glance is called Kala Shakti, the power of time, Kala Shakti. And so here's the Kala Shakti here. And it arouses, because Prakriti, Pradhana Prakriti, the Pradhana state of Prakriti. Prakriti is a feminine word, and it's considered to be feminine. And so the idea here, the Lord, male, glances over the female, and this Kala Shakti kind of arouses her, brings her back to life. And so the reason is because in this glance, all the souls who were not liberated during the last creation cycle are infused back within nature. Like, take another shot at it, because the universes are about to be created. The souls who were not liberated are about to be given another creation cycle, another opportunity to work out their karma and be spiritually enlightened. And so because these souls were not liberated, because they have karma from the last creation, because the last time the universes were created, they were out there running around doing their thing and piling up all this karma and samskaras and all that good stuff. And when the universes were annihilated, these famous cycles described in all the Puranas and all the epic literatures of India, that when the universes were then withdrawn, they were not liberated. So if you're not liberated, you still have a bunch of karma percolating in you, because you're not liberated. So therefore, when the next time the universes are created, the souls are thrown back into nature to take another shot at it. Get a body again, get out there and try again. And so it's these souls coming into nature with their karma, their destinies. It's those destinies of souls that arouses nature into action, because in a sense the reason, for example, your body is growing and the reason nature is moving is to facilitate the working out of the destinies of souls.
So are you saying the souls and the souls and their innate destinies are coming from the Lord via the Kala Shakti?
Yes, exactly.
So they don't exist in Pradhana; they exist within the Lord.
Exactly.
And then they're being to use your analogy, inseminate the Pradhana.
That's actually in the Gita you find that language. Yeah. For example, Krishna says, what's that verse that? It's aham bija pradakpita, that hi Rusty, Jonir, Mahat Jonir, that the Mahat. Oh, by the way, once the souls are injected in there, it's called Mahat, the great principle, or it's called the Mahat Tattva, nature. And so Krishna says, Mahat Jonir, that the Mahat, the material nature, is the yoni, the womb. And aham bija pradakpita, I am a seed-giving father. So this sexual imagery of Krishna or God impregnating nature, in the womb of nature, is actually in the Gita, and it's many other places. And so Here's a simple example. Imagine like some small town or some little diner, having any business all day, and the guy that owns the diner sort of, sleeping on the counter. And so you walk in, you ring a bell, you walk in the door, and he wakes up, and you want to order something, so he has to wake up, and wake the cook up, because someone wants to order something. So it's like that. When you as a soul, with your karma, your destiny, your desires, your ambitions, when you're placed back in nature kind of wakes up because there's business now. There's some customers. And so this inert, all the total material energy, which forms into billions of universes, according to this literature, billions of different universes, suddenly there's customers again. So nature is roused back into action, and it's because of the presence of souls in the universe that matter starts to interact again. It's interesting. Just like a dead body, when the soul's gone, the body doesn't walk or talk and so on. And so when Patanjali here mentions pradhana, jaya, conquering pradhana, mastery over primordial matter, it's an interesting concept, pradhana, jaya, but this is a general explanation of the notion. So there's in a sense two levels of creation, especially Puranic and Itihasa literature, these great epics and great Puranas and Gita. And that on one hand, it's a personal thing. God creates the world. But on the other hand, there's a whole mechanism. The mechanism has to do with this, and then it gets into other technical.
From what text did that phrase come from?
I forgot which Upanishad. I guess now I'm going to be teaching at the university. I'm going to have to get back and stay, do some spring training. But it may be more than one Upanishad. I can look it up. I have a little Upanishad thing, but it's one of the phrases that comes up a lot in Vedanta. So then it goes on. So from conquering the senses, you get quickness of mind, perception without the senses, and mastery of primordial matter. Then sattva purusha anyata khyati matrasya sarva bhava vishtatartvam sarva gyatatvam. For one who is attentive to the distinction between the lucid perfection of nature, which is her translation for sattva, that's a luxurious translation for the word sattva, lucid perfection of nature, and the spirit, purusha. And so sattva purusha anyata means the difference. Khyati. Matra, simply khyati, by perception, anyata, of the difference between sattva and purusha. And here are your prizes if you do that. Simply by doing that, here are the prizes. You get sarva bhava adhishtatartvam, which means power over all states of existence. Sarva, all, bhava, states of existence, and adhishtatartvam, literally adi, above, sta, standing above, or power over all states of existence, and sarva gyatartvam, omniscience. In other words, tvam, the quality, tur, of being gya, the knower, sarva, of everything.
What's the tvam?
Oh. Okay, do a little Sanskrit here. It's good. Alan's here. Boy, with Alan and Jennifer, it's actually keeping me awake. With you two here, I'm staying awake because you're both intelligent. Ask you a question.
As opposed to these other people.
My Saturday.
So, just like in English, let's say you have the word do and you add doer, or see, find, and so on. That's just English. So this suffix it makes it an agent.
Okay.
The person that does the action. So in Sanskrit, you add this.
Like mantra.
Well, no, that's different. Actually, yeah, tur is also used for family relations.
Oh, right, family relations.
Yeah, and this is a somewhat related but different use of it. So for example, you get the verb gya, to know, and then gyatur, the knower.
So when you add here tvam, is that like the accusative case or what?
Tvam is a suffix meaning ness. or knowerness, or in other words, the state of being the knower. Yeah, adi means above.
The state you require the state of being the knower.
Yeah, and the state of literally standing above. Adi means above. Adishta, tur, twam, the state of being the stander above. Literally.
So then this is implied. Then comes this state of standing above when you after being.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk for a minute about that. It's sattva. I quoted one verse in the Gita. Because sattva is closest to the soul, there's a tendency, for example, in our culture, if someone is a good person, in the material sense, they're virtuous and pious and nice and all that, to say, oh, he or she is a spiritual person. And so there's a tendency to confuse the highest material state of piety, virtue, goodness with technically what is purely a spiritual state. And that's one distinction which Krishna drives home in the Gita. And here also, you have to see the difference between sattva and the purusha. That the material goodness is not the same as the soul. And in the Gita, say in chapter 3, being specifically spiritual means devotion to God, or things directly offered to God, as opposed to mere acts of piety.
I was explaining one verse from the Gita to a friend, and she immediately shot back at me that it was contradictory. And then you clear this up, and it's in the second chapter, 46, something like that. It's like, you guys try it.
Trigunya Vishaya Veda.
Trigunya Vishaya Veda. He's Trigunya Arjuna. So the gunas, or the Vedas are trapped in gunas, or the Vedas are made up of the gunas, and these three of the gunas are Arjuna. And then the very next verse says, though, Nirvana Nitya Sattva still, eternally abide in Sattva.
Nirvana Nitya Sattva still. Yeah.
Nitya Sattva still. So he's telling the Arjuna at one point to say to go beyond the Vedas, or be without, or go beyond the gunas. But the thing, and then the very next line he says, though, always abide in Sattva. Sattva. So it's kind of
30 points, Goswami. Okay, now I've got to answer this. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a shot at this. Okay, there's two ways to understand this. Small board.
You're a big board.
I want a big board. You know what I want for Christmas. So, first of all, we'll look at the word sattva. There's two senses in which one can understand this. That, the word sat. You know the word sat. Well, literally, the way I won't do that. I won't get too technical. This is the neuter singular present participle, the verb to be. If you know, like asmi. Us is the verb to be, one of the two verbs to be. This is the root. Us, this S is related to the S in English is. And then me is first person singular. I am. Asmi. And then asmi ta. By the way, ta is just another way of saying plum. They roughly do the same thing in Sanskrit. So asmi ta means the I amness, literally. So us, but here's the verb. Us. And then it has an irregular third person plural, santi, they are. Santi is how you say they are. And you make the present participle in Sanskrit from the third person plural. So, I won't go through the whole thing, but basically from santi you get sat, which literally means be, the verb to be, ing, the present participle of be. That's literally what this word sat is. Being. And it comes to be a noun and adjective. So like satsanga, association of people who are sort of existing authentically or existing spiritually. Satsanga. And then the opposite, of course, asat. So from this word sat, if you add our old friend twam, right, you get the word sattvam. Beingness. The quality of being. The quality of really being. Now, this word is used in various ways because, again, God, this board. There's a concept found, say, in the Bhagavatam. It's very important. They're very sophisticated literature. From a literary and theological point of view, it's by far the most intellectually sophisticated Purana. It's always been seen that way. And it also has all the stories about Krishna. So it's been a very powerful cultural force in India for a long time, the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana. So in the Bhagavatam, you have the notion of Shuddha, purified or pure, Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness. And so the idea is that when you are spiritual, you are in goodness. I mean, goodness is not a bad thing. But as Krishna explains in the Gita, when you take the three modes of this world, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, three modes, Krishnas are always interacting. You find that in chapter 14, they're always interacting. So really, even when, let's say, someone is in the quality of goodness, the seeds of passion and ignorance are there. That's why we have our bad days. Like you can be a great person, just wake up irrational one day or depressed or something. We have a Dhamma that says, tamas happens. So, because in the material world, all three modes are present. And so what Krishna says is that, technically, is that a person or a thing is said to be, say, in goodness when goodness predominates. It doesn't mean the others are eliminated, but it predominates. And that's technically what Krishna says, and it predominates. And then eventually the others will predominate. It goes around, samsara chakra. So, Shuddha Sattva means purely spiritual goodness. Goodness in which there's absolutely no trace of passion or ignorance. That's spiritual. So, if you think about it, that verse where Jnana Sangena Badnati, previous screen, that goodness, by attaching you to knowledge and happiness, binds you. So that sangha, that attachment, like for example, I'm a very good person, and therefore, Prakashakam, I'm sort of wise, and Sukha, I'm kind of happy. I'm a happy person because I'm a good person. I see people nicely. So I become attached to that happiness and wisdom. I become proud of it. I become attached to it. I want more of it. And so that attachment itself is not goodness. That attachment itself is passion. In other words, when I experience something really great like wisdom and happiness, the passion that's still in me says, I want more of that. Or I want it always. I want to have control over that. And so that's the passion. So it's not. But here you have Shuddha Sattva, or sometimes Vishuddha Sattva, same thing, which is a key term. Goodness, in which there's actually no trace of passion or ignorance, because you never come down. There's no seed of the lower qualities to bring you down. And so, in a sense, I suppose in the Vaishnava tradition, they would say Krishna is speaking about this Shuddha Sattva.
So when in that verse, then he's talking about Shuddha Sattva.
You could say that there's another sense of Sattva, which is also explained actually in chapter 11 of the Bhagavatam, which I translated years ago, published actually, but in which it's explained that our basic condition in this world, say, is that, well, we're in the world, first of all. We're in these bodies, and we have to breathe air, drink water, eat food, talk to other people. We're in the world. And so therefore, if we choose spiritual life, which ultimately, according to the Gita or the Bhagavatam, means to devote ourselves to God, it means that we have to offer things to God. We make offerings, yajna. We make offerings to God, but you have to offer real things. And so in Sanskrit, real things, I mean physical things, not just ideas, that you offer are called dravya. Just real things in the world that you offer. Paraphernalia. And so for example, typically in Indian puja, they'll offer a plate of food or some water, or they'll offer some incense, or you will offer your place. You'll make your place into a sacred space. by doing certain things and so on. And so what Krishna teaches in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam is, when you're offering things to God, try to offer things in goodness. In other words, let's say you're making a little food offering to Krishna, to God, which is something described there. Then offer foods which are pure. For example, you want to offer maybe fruits or vegetables or grains as opposed to, veal cutlet or something. Or even as opposed to something which is like really hot, like really spicy, passionate food. So what Krishna is saying is because, I'll draw a little diagram here. I think this will make it very clear. Let's say down here, you all know these words, right? Here's tamas, ignorance, and then above that is rajas, and then above that is sattva, and then why don't we say above that is just the spiritual, I'll just put spiritual in English, or the soul, or the atma, whatever you want to call it. So the idea is that the more you can even get your material life, your external life, up here to goodness, the more your life is close to the spiritual. It's right bordering on spiritual. So it becomes very easy to spiritualize your life because it's already right there. Whereas if we still have, let's say if someone listens, practical, in terms of your practical, let's say music, listens to music, eats food, sees movies, uses certain language, hangs out with certain people that are down here, and so our consciousness comes down, you've got to climb all the way back up. Whereas if you kind of organize your material life up here, things in goodness, the food you eat, the music you listen to, the people you associate with, the place you live, everything's kind of in this serene quality of goodness, it becomes very easy to do your spiritual practice. So, the example I could give is, let's say you wanted to fly from San Luis Obispo to San Francisco. If you go to the airport, that's the place to go if you want to fly from San Luis Obispo. Now, if you're at the San Luis Obispo airport, in a sense, you're still not in San Francisco, you're still in San Luis Obispo, but that's the place where the planes take off. And so, in a sense, I'm all right. By being up here in goodness, it's just very easy. It's very conducive. Like, for example, if you're in a very peaceful place with very good people and you have very good, wholesome food, it's easy to sit down and meditate. Or just to talk about spiritual things or do spiritual things. And so on.
Yeah. I like your analogies. I like the airplane one. It's like the diner one. It's a good one.
The what? Which one?
The diner.
Oh, the diner. Goswami's diner. Sleep on the counter.
As soon as you leave the diner, everybody falls asleep again.
Yeah.
It's good. That comes to a good metaphysical question. Like, when you leave the diner, is everybody still awake?
Is everybody still awake?
Yeah. Okay, this is a joke, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
You'll never know, will you?
You'll never know. Actually, we'll just finish. There's just two more little things here, and then we can leave the next page for next time. Tad vairagyadapi dosha bija kshaye kaivalyam. From dispassion, even toward these powers, where you have power over all states of being and you know everything, freedom of the spirit occurs, kaivalyam, short translation of kaivalyam, with the destruction of the seeds of sin. She translates the word dosha as sin, which is kind of a little surprised by that. The Sanskrit word dosha, in the most literal sense, means a flaw or a fault. And it's always given as an antonym, the opposite of guna. Guna means not only quality, it also means a good quality. Like in English, the word quality doesn't mean any quality, it also means a good quality. Quality product. Same in Sanskrit. So the word guna means a good quality. So guna and dosha are antonyms, they're opposites.
They both mean quality, but dosha means...
Dosha means like flaw. A flaw, a problem with something, some fault in something, some flaw.
In Ayurveda, the dosha is a term for a constituent of the body.
Yes, that's a different use.
Okay.
But here...
No relation,
there may be something you could figure out somehow, but That's sort of a different method. So, this is very important. If you ever, I lived on a farm when I was young. I lived on a farm in Brazil, actually, where Govinda was. Were you born there? He was born there, on a very beautiful farm, actually extraordinarily scenic, between Rio and Sao Paulo, by a mountain range called Mantiqueira. And so, when you think of field, an agricultural field, and you want to plant it, if you're in a hurry and don't want to, really do it right, you can just cut down all the weeds, and then you plant whatever you want, you water it. But if you really want that field to be clean, you have to uproot. You actually have to. You can't just cut the plants down. You have to uproot them. You have to really take the seeds out. Otherwise, it grows back. So, I personally worked with farmers, and so I saw this. So you always have this thing of the beej of the seed, really taking the seed out, uprooting it. We even have this word, nirmulana, uprooting the illusion. And that's what it's. And that's the concept here. So that you never again fall back into illusion. And that comes from tadvairagya, from becoming detached even from these powers. Then the last one, stanyupanimantrane, sangha smaya akaranam punar anishta prasangat. One should avoid enthusiasm, her translation of sangha somehow, or pride, smaya, in the enticements of the gods. Literally the upanimantranas, the invitations of the gods. The invitations, the enticements of the gods. And the word for God there is stani, which stands for stani, and one who stands, one who has a standing, which apparently means you're the gods. Stani. Lest harmful attachments occur. And harmful attachments is translated for unishta, which literally means the undesired, something which is not wanted, something which is unwanted, unishta. Akaranam, avoid, not doing. From the verb to do, to make, not doing. That's just a simple noun. In Sanskrit, you can make a noun out of any verbal root by adding anam, like smaranam, shravanam, karanam. It's just a neuter noun, doing.
What would be the implied verb in that?
Not, it's not the imperative. It's just sort of not doing. The not doing of these two things, not making pride or not making. Question.
Not making sistani upon mantrane.
Yeah, not making sangha or smaya upanimantrane upon the upanimantrana, the invitation of the stanis, those who have standing. And you can translate it God, just anyone who has a standing, anyone who has status. It's like people that have got status is sort of what it means, really. Even the word status is from the same Sanskrit root.
She translated one should, like it implies, one should, like it's telling you somebody to do something or to avoid.
Exactly.
So if it was an implied verb, I would think that it would be an imperative.
Yeah, her translation there is not literal.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she's putting a verb in there where it's not. So you have to what would be your translation of it?
Punaranishta prasangat. I would be, if I wanted to be hopelessly literal, I might do it differently, but I think the reason she put should in is because of the last word prasangat. Because something would happen. In other words, or just what, I might do it, say one does not, I might translate it, one does not become proud or attached. Sangha, it seems really, I don't know why she said enthusiasm. She passed away, so I can't ask her, but.
So Sangha Smaya Karanam would be a state that that was a state you would acquire if you avoid,
Well, no, actually, literal translate, I'll translate it literally, okay? Stani, people that have status, upanimanjana, upon receiving invitations or enticements from people that have status.
That's the locative case.
Yeah, locative, which means upon this happening, when this happens. That's called the locative absolute.
Okay.
It means when this happens.
Okay.
When there is an invitation from the status people, or the gods, one does not make attachment or pride. Akaranam, one does not make sangha attachment or smaya pride, because, and the last thing, the last two letters, at, means because of the prasanga, because the consequence would be punar, again, anishta, the unwanted would occur.
Undesired attachment or something.
Yeah, because then the unwanted would occur again. The word smile is interesting. It means pride. It literally means smiling. It's kind of like this kind of smile. It's like a proud smile. Can anyone here do a proud smile just to show? Anyone here? Anyone want to do a haughty smile? Anyone here feel haughty? No. Everyone here is so humble. But the word for smile is kind of like the smirk. It almost means like a smirk. The English word smile is related to the Sanskrit. English smile, Sanskrit smile. It's also like a smirk. So that means pride.
Alright.
So one does not make attachment or pride upon the invitations of the status people for God, because then the undesired would happen again. That's literally what it means.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean an undesired like in the sense of spiritual progress, not necessarily in the sense of what the person wants.
Well, here you're a spiritual practitioner. You're trying to master this yoga that Patanjali is teaching, so what you don't want is to be dragged back down to where you were before you started all this.
Yeah, but you can't get dragged into attachment without minding the effects. It doesn't happen.
Therefore it says one should not make attachment. That's the whole point. In other words, if I say one does not make attachment, it means that you have the choice. It doesn't say here you can be a victim of attachment. It says you do not make it. You do not make attachment. Do not make pride. It's very interesting. I mean, this is idiomatic in Sanskrit, but it's also revealing that the way they talk, you make pride. It's almost like well, that's what the Lord says. You make pride. You do pride. You make pride. You make attachment. It's an interesting concept.
Well, it is. I mean, given sometimes it's taken as an intrinsic part of human nature that pride and attachment are just there. But this is suggesting that there's a state of yourself beyond that you actually make those and create those yourself, rather than
especially when you're at a certain stage in your spiritual practice, you sort of have a choice. Let's say some poor guy that's just hopelessly lost in materialism, doesn't have any notion of spirituality. But once you reach a certain level, and that's what Patanjali is talking to here.
The ego, pride comes from the ego mindset. And it's kind of like what we were saying before, getting lost in the knowledge, getting lost in all that instead of...
But you can't be proud of something if you don't have any power. Like you have to first gain power over something, then you get proud of it, and then punch back down. And the process of gaining the power of yoga is also bringing you up to a more spiritual way of being. And if you make a mistake of being prideful about it, or using that power for your own desires, let's say, and not you back down.
Automatic shut-off device.
What if you use that as the wrong thing?
Yes, and we are talking about people that are getting power over everything and they know everything. And
Yeah, I have people who are prideful to me because they've also come from a little and they work their way up in things. Maybe their living situations that they've been fighters kind of in their life because things have happened to them in their life, circumstances that having come through that, they take a lot of pride in their ability to work through that, and it's just, I don't know, it seems like a thing. It comes from a different place.
well, it's not a spiritual way of understanding one's own history. In other words, like you could think, well, sure, I struggled, but I never could have done it without the blessings of God, unless I've been helped, because a lot of people struggle and don't make it. And so it's the vanity kicks in there that I give myself all the credit, rather than seeing that my effort was really insufficient. It was only because someone was helping me that it actually worked. For example, someone gave me the help to continue working. Someone gave me the ideas, the inspiration, the enthusiasm. Different people were sent into my life. Different things happened. Because in any life, if you think back of your life, things can go so many ways. I think I'm at least, I don't know how many thousands of times with bad luck I would have been killed while I was driving. Because I lived in LA for a while. and I just noticed literally so many times, like I would change lanes, I would do this, that, and it just occurred to me, in that situation, there could have been a car, this could have happened, that could have happened, because we're not always completely careful. And so there's hundreds and thousands of moments in our lives when it could have gone a very different way. We might not have met that person. Someone might not have helped us. We might have had an accident. So that idea of a self-made man or self-made woman is I think, really delusion. Although our effort is necessary. You could say God helps those who help themselves, and so it's not that our effort means nothing. By the way, they debate this. That's the Mahabharata is debated on this topic. I'll show you the words they use. They this very topic about who gets the credit, or who's really what's really making things happen. Duryodhana in the Mahabharata is sort of the evil king, the cousin of the Pandavas. He's always getting frustrated because he's a consummate materialist. He's very shrewd, but nothing ever exactly goes right. And so he's always lamenting. The one thing is Purusha Kara, which sort of means human effort here. Purusha, the person, Kara, their acts, like our own acts. And then the other one is Daiva, from the word Deva, which means God, and then Daiva, sort of like providence, like heaven sent by heaven and so on. And so Duryodhana is always lamenting, what's the use of Purusha Kara? Like, I give up, I'm not even going to bother trying. What's the use of Purusha Kara? Daiva is all powerful. And so, when you look back in your life, everyone comes up with a version of their life. And is it realistic? Have I taken full account of all the help I've received, of the role of God in my life, and so even when I wasn't aware of it? So, pride. Obviously I prefer a version of my life which gives me all the credit.
Reminds me of that footprint, that Christian home thing.
The what?
Footprints.
Footprint?
Is it ever, heard of it before? Is it, with the footprints in the sand. You ever seen that, the Christian thing? One night a guy dreams he's walking on the beach with the Lord, and then he looks back over his life, and during his time of trial and suffering, he sees only one set of footsteps. So he cries to the Lord, why in my times of suffering have you abandoned me? Oh, in my time, my sweet, sweet child, it is then that I carried you.
Oh, yeah.
My grandma, a Christian woman, had that up in the kitchen.
That's nice. That's very nice.
So like a fine line between self-esteem and pride. So, walking the razor's edge.
As far as self-esteem, I like to think that, knowing that God loves you should make you love yourself also. If God sees value in me, then by taking God seriously, I see value in myself. If I can somehow see myself as God sees me, I can have the confidence to live well without becoming proud, and see myself as God sees me.
The greatest teachers, they live it. It's self-esteem as pride, it just comes across in people that are old adage, and those who say do not know, those who know do not say. So, sometimes that pride or that wanting to kick in, if you are that, then it just kind of, there's nothing that you have to prove or pride, there's nothing that,
I want to try to convince you that I'm really a hungry person.
You know what I mean. It's
yeah. Yeah, it's true. Anything else? So, we have some little refreshments.